Nothing you're about to hear should be taken as or used in place of medical advice. If you resemble anything you hear, contact your doctor. If you want to know what Walgreens thinks, ask them, because we don't know. Please wait behind the line for privacy.
You're listening to the Pharmacist Answers podcast. I'm Cynthia, the pharmacist, and today you'll get your questions answered and your curiosity cured.
The membranes we're going to talk about today are the membranes that hold your brain in place. So they're very important. But this can be one of those places where there's going to be a lot of words that you may have never heard before. They're very important, and to know the difference and what they do. Hearing stories about people in the news, or maybe hearing medical reports from people that you love, these kinds of words are going to make more sense when you at least learn them and be like, okay, I remember hearing that once. It may possibly get a little vocabulary heavy, but we're going to take it nice and slow. If you just took a chunk out of your head all the way down and took the chunk out to look at it, this is what the layers would look like. So things we already know about. Your skin, your bones, and then you have this triple layer membrane that has some unusual names that we'll talk about in a second. But these membranes help attach to your skull inside and hold your brain in place. So if you could kind of stretch it all out, your skull would be the ceiling, the walls, and the floor. And on all of the sides of this room that's in your head are all of these protuberances, rafters and pillars and different places where something can anchor to it. So these membranes are the thing that anchors to all of those things sticking out of the ceiling, the walls, and the floor. And the membrane holds on to that. And the membrane, it has different functions, and the different layers of it have different functions. We'll talk about that in a second. But it's very fluid and very flexible. And then your brain sits inside, so it doesn't touch the ceiling, and it doesn't touch any of the walls, and it doesn't sit on the floor. It's held suspended in the middle. One of the reasons why concussions are even possible, because it's nice and suspended, and if your head is jolted, then those suspensions move and it allows the brain to bump into one of the sides of that room that it's living in. So our membranes, it has 3 layers. The layer that connects to your bone is called the dura mah-ter. And this word is mah-ter, like alma mater, like the Latin for mother, and not may-ter, like the truck from Pixar's Cars, okay? So mah-ter, not may-ter. Dura mah-ter. It's thick. It's really durable. You can kind of remember that. Dura. And it's the thing that actually has all of the anchor connections to the bones inside your head. These 3 layers all together, this is called the meninges, which is the reason why a certain health condition or infection that you can have is called meningitis. Meningitis is the inflammation or infection of one of these 3 or all 3 of these layers. Since it's close to your brain, that sounds kind of bad. Don't want meningitis. It can be bad, okay? But all of 3 of these added together, it's called the meninges. And it actually covers your brain, and then as it reaches the back of your head here, where your spinal cord connects, it coats your entire spinal cord all the way down to your tailbone. So the meninges are this encasing, and they do the same thing for your spinal cord. It coats them, it gives it protection, and it kind of anchors out to the sides of your vertebrae in your spine. So then it's suspended in the middle. And so that dura mah-ter, that durable layer, it holds a lot of the big blood vessels. So as your blood vessels come up from your heart and into your head and do all of these things, the larger ones will flow through the dura mater and then branch into smaller ones. But that's the membrane that helps divide the hemispheres of your brain. You know, you've seen the brain and it looks like it's got two pieces stuck together. The dura mater goes in between them. It actually will divide several other lobes of your brain, and it coats some of the other glands that are deeper inside your brain, like your pituitary gland and your hypothalamus and things like that. So it's this durable coating for all of those things to try to give it as much protection as possible. The middle layer is called the arachnoid layer. And arachnoid, yes, it sounds like arachnid, like spiders, because when they actually do brain dissections and start looking at the layers and taking them apart, it looks like spider webs. It's very webby, very wispy, and has lots of holes in it that allows for the cerebral fluid to pass. And there is actually space between the bottom layer, which is the pia layer, and the arachnoid layer, and that is called the subarachnoid space. And this space can be kind of important. Well, it's very important. One, because that's where your cerebrospinal fluid is housed and hangs out. And this is a fluid system that is very compact and closed off. It doesn't cross into other places. So if you don't want blood in this area, you don't want your immune system cells getting in this area, if that happens, that means something is bad. But cerebrospinal fluid is a fluid system that just flows around your brain and your spinal cord, cerebro-brain, spinal cord. And so that space is full of that liquid. And the arachnoid layer actually it anchors itself to the pia layer with like cellular cables, like the way you would have cables that would suspend like a bridge or something like that. Those little cellular tubes anchor the two things together. And then the pia layer being the bottom one. Now this layer doesn't follow the same contours as the dura mater layer. The dura mater, I said, it goes between your hemispheres and will help divide some of the lobes of your brain and some of the other glands that are all encased inside. The pia layer is directly in contact with the cells of the brain. And so the pia layer coats the brain, and it touches and goes inside every single wrinkle and indentation and groove that your brain has. And we know the brain's wrinkly. And it goes into all of those contours and fits on it perfectly like a glove, and is very hard to be separated from the brain for that reason. But the larger blood vessels that are in the dura mater, as they branch off and travel towards the brain, that is where those tiny capillaries land to then be able to transfer nutrients and things into the cells of the brain. Thus, it touches it in so many places and covers and fits in all the grooves and contours of the brain, because it has to be able to touch as many of those brain cells as possible to get those capillaries as close as possible to those cells so those nutrients can be transferred. If people have brain bleeds, and I had some guys asking me about brain bleeds a couple of weeks ago, they will locate a brain bleed based on where the bleed is in relation to these layers. So a subdural hematoma is a pocket of blood that ends up underneath the dura mater but above the arachnoid layer. So that tells you what layer of that membrane the bleed is. The subarachnoid space, if blood gets in there, they know that's bad. Blood that ends up right underneath the bone, maybe not so bad. Bleeds that end up further down here, closer to your brain, a lot worse. Lots of vocabulary, but having the vocabulary, so when you hear like the big words that people say, if it's a family member that gets a medical report, or you hear something or read something in the news and they use these big medical terms, you'll at least have a place to connect and be like, okay, yeah, that's in one of those layers of the membranes of the brain. That's all I have for today. Bye!
Thanks for listening to the Pharmacist Answers podcast. The pharmacy is now closed. You can post your questions and comments on our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/pharmanswerspod. Or you can email the show at pharmacistanswershere pharmacistAnswersPodcast@gmail.com. You can tweet me or message me on Twitter @SinHendrix. You can find the show notes at pharmacistanswershere.wordpress.com. Pharmacist Answers broadcasts live on Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 9:02 a.m. Eastern Time on the Periscope app. You can follow me @SinHendrix or view in your web browser at periscope.tv/SinHendrix. See you next time on the Pharmacist Answers podcast.